Well, my name is Cornelius. For those of you who are new, I'm here. I'm back in Taiwan. Some of you may have heard Winnie's dad passed away on Christmas Day, and some of you have sent messages of support and kind words. So thank you. We haven't been able to reply all of you, but thank you for that. I'm back with the girls because they have to go to school. Winnie will be back next week. Yeah, we feel loved by all of you. Thank you. Um, Today, I want to share with you this message from Ezekiel chapter 1. It's a long chapter, it's a long passage, so I'm going to ask someone with a better voice than mine to help me read the passage. I haven't asked anyone, so this is kind of impromptu. I'm looking at Jordan because he's looking down, he doesn't want to be asked. So, Jordan, would you be able to help us read Ezekiel chapter 1? Yes. Thank you.
All right, Ezekiel chapter 1. In the 30th year, in the 4th month, on the 5th day of the month, while I was among the exiles by the Chebar Canal, sorry if I say names wrong, the heavens were open and I saw visions of God. On the 5th day of the month, it was the 5th year of King Joachim's exile, the word of the Lord came directly to the priest Ezekiel, son of Buzi, in the land of the Chaldeans by the Chebar Canal. The Lord's hand was on him there. I looked, and there was a whirlwind coming from the north, a huge cloud with fire flashing back and forth, and brilliant light all around it. In the center of the fire, there was a gleam like amber. The likeness of four living creatures came from it, and this was their appearance. They looked something like a human, but each of them had 4 faces and 4 wings. Their legs were straight, and the soles of their feet were like the hooves of a calf, sparkling like the gleam of polished bronze. They had human hands under their wings on their 4 sides. All 4 of them had faces and wings. Their wings were touching. The creatures did not turn as they moved. Each one went straight ahead. Their faces looked something like the face of a human, and each of the 4 had the face of a lion on the right, the face of an ox on the left, and the face of an eagle. That is what their faces were like. Their wings were spread upward. Each had 2 wings touching that of another, 2 wings covering its body. Each creature went ahead wherever the Spirit wanted to go. They went without turning as they moved. The likeness of the living creatures was like the appearance of blazing coals of fire or like torches. Fire was moving back and forth between the living creatures. It was bright and lightning coming out of it. The creatures were darting back and forth like flashes of lightning. When I looked at the living creatures, there was 1 wheel on the ground besides each of the 4-faced creatures. The appearance of the wheels and their craftsmanship was like gleamed beryl, and all 4 had the same likeness. Their appearance and craftsmanship was like a wheel within a wheel. When they moved, they went in any of the 4 directions without turning as they moved. Their 4 rims were tall and awe-inspiring, completely covered with eyes. When the living creatures moved, and the wheels moved beside them, and when the creatures rose from the earth, the wheels also rose. Wherever the Spirit wanted to go, the creatures went in the direction the Spirit was moving. The wheels rose alongside them, for the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. When the creatures moved, the wheels moved. When the creatures stopped, the wheels stopped. And when the creatures rose from the earth, the wheels rose alongside them. For the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. Over the heads of the living creatures, the likeness of an expanse was spread out. It gleamed like all-aspiring crystal, and under the expanse their wings extended one toward another. They each also had 2 wings covering their bodies. When they moved, I heard the sound of their wings like the roar of a huge torrent, like the voice of the Almighty, and a sound of tumult like the noise of an army. When they stopped, they lowered their wings. A voice came from above the expanse over their heads. When they stopped, they lowered their wings. Something like a throne with the appearance of lapis lazuli was above the expanse over their heads. On the throne, high above, was someone who looked like a human. From what seemed to be his waist up, I saw a gleam like amber, with what looked like fire enclosing it all around. From what seemed to be his waist down, I saw what looked like fire. There was a brilliant light all around him. The appearance of the brilliant light all around was like that of a rainbow in the cloud on a rainy day. This was the appearance of the likeness of the Lord's glory. When I saw it, I fell face down and heard a voice speaking.
Thank you, Jordan. Sorry to put you on the spot. How many of you were able to visualize what the passage was saying? It's hard, right? It's really otherworldly. It's not, well, literally it is not from this world. I think people have had different theories. Did Ezekiel see a UFO, or was it a Black Hawk helicopter, or was it China Airlines or something? People had this all sort of theories. I don't want you to get caught up in the details. Not that you're not allowed to. You can if you want to read the book further, if you want to study it. But that's not what I'm going to do tonight. I want to look at Ezekiel, actually kind of a sweeping journey from Ezekiel chapter 1 to the end. But I just want to observe one particular topic, and that is the presence of God. Now, when I should have preached this last week, but I had to go to Indonesia for the funeral. I remember the worship leader asked me what passage it was, so that Sabrina could prepare songs that fits the passage. I wondered what songs could you choose after reading a passage like this. But the Bible is never meant to be read as some sort of deep secret. God doesn't mean the Bible to be a riddle, like unnecessarily enigmatic. He wants to say something. He wants to communicate something. He wants to make the message clear. So when you see images in details, they're not meant to confuse us, but they're actually meant to give clarity of what God is trying to communicate to us. Now, the setting of this passage is really important, so I'm going to spend a bit of time there. In the 70s, there's a song by Bob Marley. I'm not that old. I only know this by Googling. He quotes Psalm 137, actually. The lyrics of the song says, "By the rivers Babylon we sat down, yea, we wept as we remember Zion." I don't know how to sing it. It is a verbatim quote from Psalm 137, verse 1. By the rivers Babylon, by the river Kebar, maybe, that's how I would say it. We sat down and we wept as we remember Zion. And that's kind of, the setting of the feeling of people there by the Kebar Canal that day, I would assume. If I can read Ezekiel 1 again quickly, from just the first verse. In the 30th year, in the 4th month, on the 5th day of the month, where I was among the exiles by the Kebar Canal, the heavens were open and I saw visions of God. Ezekiel the prophet was among the exiles. Now, being an exile is, it's not great. It's not a really uplifting title. It's not something you say with pride. I'm an exile, It's because being invaded, back then it wasn't a civilized process. Even now, war, battles, invasion, let alone back then, you can only imagine from watching action movies. It was a bloody process. There was victims all over, death all over. People lost a lot of things, and they were taken to Babylon as an exile, and that's a difficult feeling. It's a difficult identity to have, to be an exile. So I would imagine Ezekiel sitting by the river, by the canal of Kebar, among the exiles. I don't think they're always gloomy all the time, but I think the generic feeling, it wasn't great being an exile. Now, according to people who studied history, actually, the life of the Israelites in Babylon, it wasn't always that bad. They were given the opportunity to replant their lives. Actually, they can have properties, they can have businesses. In fact, some of them had really high positions in the government, like Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, and a lot of other people, even all the way to Esther and Mordecai. So life wasn't always that bad. They're not enslaved or anything, because the Babylonian Empire tried to be civilized, but they also tried to impose that identity. So if you remember Daniel and the three friends, they were actually given new names, Babylonian names, because the king, the government, they wanted the Hebrew people to assimilate into this new identity. Well, in a way, although life was not too hard for them, I think there is still that knowing feeling that they are in exile. That's not a pleasant identity to have. They're defeated. That's how you become an exile, by the way. Your country is defeated. They're second-class citizen. You know, they're not just migrants. They're exiles. And it is among this situation when people were there with all those mixed feelings of being in exile, it was there and then when God came. Interestingly, God showed up, right? Now, being in exile, it's not just traumatic physically. A lot of people then, because it says this was on the 5th year after the exile. So it was still fresh in their memories. They might have lost their loved ones in the war. They lost their homes, their property. But being in exile is not only a traumatic experience physically and emotionally, it was also challenging spiritually, especially for the Jewish people, because well back then they had this sentiment that God is powerful and their God is supposed to defend them, right? In the ancient culture, they believe that each god has their own domain. They're powerful, but only within certain areas, right? Actually, even until now here, I think some cultures still feel that way. There's still this sense that each geographical location has its own like spiritual power there. I remember when I grew up in Indonesia as a kid, Indonesian people, at least back then when I was a kid, it's a long time ago, decades ago, was quite superstitious. I remember my parents taught me, we are Christians by the way, but so don't think badly about my parents. This is just how the society works. He said, whenever you go through a little bridge or something, you have to say, excuse me, the Indonesian people, you'd probably know. And, sometimes when you had to pee, you have to go. You're a little boy and you're somewhere around and nobody's there and you have to pee in the bush or something. You have to say, excuse me, because otherwise people get demon-possessed doing things like that. Because you got to ask permission to the local spiritual, even if it's just a hut or a tree. I remember when I was in Australia one day, it was one cold night. I was driving out with some friends and we parked the car and a friend of mine came out of the car and he was standing in the dark like I was trying to think, what is he doing? So he was taking a pee and I heard him whispering, excuse me, of course in English because it's in Australia, so you have to speak in English to the local deity or the local spiritual power in that tree in the suburb. Because in Indonesian you would say, oh, permisi, numpang, or something like that. The Indonesian people would know. There's that sense, even back then in the ancient world, they also think like that. The way warfares work often is like, hey, this is my army with my God, with my banner, and I will attack your kingdom with your army and your God, see who's stronger. Well, how could God, Yahweh, the ruler of the universe, be defeated by Marduk, the god of Babylon? It was a spiritual crisis. There's one story in the book of Kings when the king of Aram attacked Israel and they had this warfare on the hillside and Israel won. And the king of Aram said, oh, they won because the God that Israel worship is the God of the mountains. He's a mountain specialist. That's why we lost. Let's attack them flat ground. And they lost again because God was offended. There's that story in 1 Kings 20, if you want to read it. God is trying to teach them a lesson. I am the ruler of the universe. I'm not just a mountain god, mountain goat, mountain god. I'm not just a valley god. You know, like in the Greek mythology or the Roman mythology, this is God of the ocean, God of the, well, they have a plethora of gods. God of the sky and God of the land, God of fertility. But our God, the God of Israel, Jehovah, he's God of the universe. He's God of everything. So if you read 1 Kings 20, God defeated the king of Aram because God shows that he is the ruler of the universe. So there's that question, not just has our army been defeated, but also has our God been defeated? But throughout the generations, throughout the kings of Israel and Judah, they also start to develop this spiritual bankruptcy and a sense of false security. As long as Jerusalem is standing, as long as we have the temple standing, as long as we have the Ark of Covenant, we are safe because God will protect us. But that notion was obviously broken when Israel was invaded by the Assyrian kingdom in 622 BC, and Jerusalem fell in 586 BC by the kingdom of Babylon. So there was that notion among them. Is God really powerful? Have we worshipped the right God? Or maybe this. Maybe we did worship the right God, that He is powerful, but He has abandoned us. He has left us. Because we have been so sinful, we have been so rebellious toward Him. And they know that. Because God had sent a lot of prophets before all these exiles happened. It didn't just happen suddenly. For the generations and years, God had sent many prophets to remind the kingdom of Israel and Judah of their sin. If you want to, I guess, capture the emotional sentiment of the people back then by the river Kebar, I guess the verse right next to it sums it really well. If you have your paper Bible, you could turn to the book before Ezekiel, Lamentations. The last chapter, the last verse. Lamentations 5:21, 22. Or if you have your electronic Bible, you can just sweep. It says, Lord, bring us back to yourself so we may return. Renew our days as in former times, unless you have completely rejected us and are intensely angry with us. It's an open question. Lord, bring us back to yourself. Or maybe you have completely rejected us and are intensely angry with us. This is a familiar feeling, I guess, with many people. And I don't know if some of you sitting tonight here, you're also feeling the same thing. Has God abandoned me? Is He still with me? Is God pleased with my life? I've been so sinful. I've been so away from the Lord. Has He completely rejected me? Because there's that sense back to the people by the river Kebar that day. There's not only a sense of shame of being an exile, but there's also a sense of guilt. Hence these words. Have you completely rejected us? Because we have sinned. And they know that. So that day when God showed up, He made two statements at least. The first one is that He is powerful. He has not been defeated by the god of Babylon. Every year there's an institution, I think called Handelian Partners or something. They issue a ranking of the world's most powerful passports. I think number one now is Singapore. If you have a Singaporean passport, you can go to like 196 countries without a visa or what. And then I think USA is definitely in the top 10. If you have an American passport, it's easy for you to travel. When I still held my Indonesian passport, it was a bit difficult for me because to go to Taiwan, to go to Hong Kong, many countries I had to apply for visa. So they rank this. The idea is the more quote unquote powerful your passport is, it allows you, it gives you passage to many places. And God showed that He is powerful because He doesn't have to ask permission to the God of Babylon. He can just walk in and out of Babylon as He pleases. He's the God of the universe. He's not just God of Israel, He's also God of Babylon. He's not confined within the holy city of Jerusalem. If He wants to be in Babylon, He can be in Babylon, and He showed that. He shows that by being present by the river that day, God is showing that, I'm here. I'm alive and well. I'm not defeated. I'm sovereign not only in Israel, but also here in the land of the exile. There's also a sense of purity involved here. Would God show up in a defiled land such as Babylon? But apparently He did, to be with His people. And that's the second statement that God is making. Not only that He is still powerful and sovereign, He cares. In a way, it's an answer to Lamentations 5. Have you completely rejected us? No. He's still there with His people. And He showed this to the prophet Ezekiel. Well, in the Bible, in the Old Testament, many times God showed Himself, His glory to people, to the Israelites. Remember when they moved from Egypt to the Promised Land throughout the journey, 40 years in the desert, the pillar of fire and cloud, such a amazing manifestation of God's glory and God's presence. Sometimes in a smaller scale as well, like Moses saw the burning bush. Sometimes it's a bit grandiose, when Solomon dedicated the temple, the presence of God descended so strongly that even the priests could not stand in the temple. So the people of Israel throughout history, they're not foreign to the idea of God's manifestation of His glory. But there is something a bit different in the way Ezekiel describes the glory of God that day. It's almost like he's obsessed with the wheels. Like, what's with the wheels, You have meals on wheels. This is God on wheels, glory on wheels. What does the wheel signify? Again, don't think too much. Actually, if you read commentaries, people just conclude that those wheels within wheels, kind of like a gyroscope, facing all four directions. In short, it's a symbol of God's omnipresence. He can be anywhere. He can travel anywhere. He can be present anywhere. Wheels just signify movement. And so God was moving. He was there in Babylon. The book of Ezekiel has 48 chapters. In all of these chapters, aside from chapter 1, which we just read, you see the manifestation of God's glory. If you read from chapter 1 all the way to 48, you will see 3 more movements of God's glory. In Ezekiel chapter 10, the glory of God leaves the temple. And then if you read on in Ezekiel chapter 11, God's glory leaves the city of Jerusalem completely. Why? What happened? Why did God leave His precious holy city? Why? Well, it's because of their sin. In Ezekiel chapter 8, verse 17, it says, "And He said to me," to Ezekiel, "Do you see this, Son of Man? Is it not enough for the house of Judah to commit the detestable acts they are doing here, that they must also fill the land with violence and repeatedly anger me, even putting the branch to their nose? Therefore I will respond with wrath. I will not show pity or spare them. Though they call loudly in my hearing, I will not listen to them." That's what caused God to abandon them, well, temporarily, to leave, for His presence to move out of the temple. and then out of the city. That's Ezekiel chapter 10 and 11. Well, the third movement is when you go all the way to Ezekiel 43. In Ezekiel 43, verses 2 and 4, if you were taking notes, Ezekiel saw the glory of God returns to Jerusalem and to the temple. What happened? What happened in between Ezekiel 10, 11, and 43 that caused the temple of God now, the glory of God now returns to Israel? I'll tell you what happened. Ezekiel 36, verse 26, 27 happened. It's a very famous passage. Ezekiel 36, verses 26, 27, it says, I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit within you. I will remove your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. I will place my spirit within you and cause you to follow my statutes and carefully observe my ordinances. If it was sin that drove God away from his people, that it was the antidote of sin that also mended that relationship. Now that they're given a new heart, a new spirit to obey, the glory of God returns. We're doing, this is promotional. TIFF is doing an a year-long Bible reading, Bible recap. I feel like the book of Ezekiel is a mini recap of the Bible. It shows the ultimate problem that we have, separation from God. Is God still with us? Is he angry with us? But it is also a fulfillment of promise that one day I will give you a new heart, a new spirit, and then my glory will return. And I will be with you. I mentioned before that the book of Ezekiel has 48 chapters. When you arrive at chapter 41 and you read onwards to 48, it would feel familiar. It would feel like reading the book of Exodus and Leviticus. It's full of measurements. Right? The windows, they're this size, and then there's a door for the priest. You know, when you do your Bible reading and you get to this part, it seems barren of revelations, like what is God trying to say to me, with the incense, such and such grams. So not even grams or pounds, it was in ancient measurements. Ezekiel 41 to 48 marks the ending of the book. 41 to 48. It tells about this new city with a new temple in it. In Ezekiel 47, there's this amazing description of this temple with the living water flowing out of the temple. It reminds you straight away of Revelation. This is really heavenly, otherworldly. Obviously, this is not a normal temple. This is not a normal city. And the way Ezekiel 41 to 48, obviously 8 chapters, is quite long. Describe the city is quite detailed. Like you will see the such and such rooms and all the measurements, and these people will have this land and allocation of land, and the priests will have such and such duty. It's almost like reading the books of Moses all over again. But weirdly enough, in all of these stories, long, 8 chapters, the name of the city is never mentioned. Not until the very end of the book of Ezekiel. You will find it a bit weird, right? Because it's like if I say to Martin, hey Martin, do you want to go with me next week? Let's go camping. And Martin asked, Cornelius, where are we going? Let's go. And I said, oh, Martin, you will love this place because there's a really nice night market just 2 blocks away. You will have cho tofu everywhere and all these fragrant tofu as well, and all of these beautiful food. Oh, that's great, Cornelius. Where are we going? And I said, oh, the accommodation. It's amazing. We have air conditioning. We open the window and you can see the ocean. The other window and you can see the hills. The other window and you can see me because I'll be there. And Martin asking, oh, where is this place? Where are we going? Oh, did you say transportation? Easy, right? I will drive you there. You don't have to worry. And I keep going on and on for 45 minutes. And Martin keep asking, so where are we going? But of course, being patient and gentle as the German he is, he's not. But I kept going and going for 1 hour, describing the journey until, and then, oh yeah, we're going to Hualien. It's a bit of, when you read Ezekiel chapter 48, that's the last chapter in the book, verse 35, which is the last verse. The perimeter of the city will be 6 miles. Again, all these details about the borders and the size and the measurements. And it ends like this. And the name of the city from that day on will be, the Lord is there, Jehovah Shammah. And that's it. That's how the book ends. Mind you, back then people didn't have a copy of scripture like we do now. Except you're the king. You have a copy of scripture, which you have to write yourself. But most people would just listen to scripture being read, I think once a year, or at least once a year. So you would imagine when the book of Ezekiel was being read, the perimeter of the city will be 6 miles, and the name of the city from that day on will be, and if it was a Bible quiz, people would, Jerusalem, Jerusalem. Of course it's Jerusalem, right? It's the city of God with the temple in the middle. What other city is that? That's Jerusalem. But no, there's a twist. The name of the city is Jehovah Shammah. The Lord is there. In a way, this ending answers this knowing question that the exiled by the river Kebar had. Is God still with us? Is His presence still with us? That's a question that we ask, or we should be asking. And that's the question that the Bible is trying to answer as well. And if you read this ending, you could almost hear the echo of its fulfillment in the New Testament. Because the virgin will conceive. She will have a son. And they will call him Emmanuel, God with us. Right? It's Jesus who says, I will go to the Father and I give you the Spirit. I will give you the Holy Spirit. That's the Spirit that will renew our heart of stone and replace it with a heart of flesh, like promised in Ezekiel 36, 26, 27. That's the same Spirit that will give us the ability, that will cause us to be able to walk in His statutes and obey Him and love Him. And that is the turning point that marks the return of the glory of God, the presence of God into the life of people. So I want to close with this. If you're sitting here with that question, is God with me? And you should be asking that question, or I'm asking that question now. Where do you stand with the Lord? Are you at peace with Him? Is He with you? Can you say confidently that His presence is with me? We are in the beginning of 2025, a lot of things will happen. I can tell you this, 2025 or any other year, you don't want to go through life without the presence of God with you. It has been promised. We are not supposed to be defeated by sin. He has done the work. He has conquered sin. Jesus died on the cross so that we can have the victory. And all of these promises, the situation that Ezekiel and the people by the river Kebar was facing, the promise and the fulfillment, they all point to Jesus. We cannot fight sin. We cannot invite God with our own will, with our own volition or holiness. We can never afford to bring the presence of God back. We need God's intervention to clear away the sin, to remove that heart of stone and give us a heart of flesh, so that He can be reconciled with us once again. And that's what Jesus offers us. So tonight, as I close, I want you to think about His invitation. If you want to be reconciled with God, if you want to have the presence of God in your life. And again, you might be asking, you might be feeling the same question and feeling that people by that river, by the canal, was asking, would God be willing to come into my heart, to come into my life, to have a relationship with me? I'm a sinner. I'm not worthy. I'm a bad person. The answer is yes. The answer is yes. If you would come to him and invite him. Talk to me, talk to Pastor Todd and the elders after the service if you would like to have a relationship with God and be made at peace with him, and we'll be happy to talk to you.